The legendary figure of the Northern Liang Kingdom, Empress Dowager Huizheng, was reborn returned to the Marquis' mansion. In her previous life, Anxia was blind and fell in love with the incompetent, selfish, and indifferent King of Jin at first sight. She even pushed him to the throne with great effort, causing harm to the common people. After he dies, we still have to clean up the mess for him. In this life, she only wanted to live a peaceful life with her mother and her lost brother, but to her surprise, she was born with a phoenix destiny and picked up a husband who came to her door. Surprisingly, her husband was the young emperor of the Western Liang Kingdom who had died for 10 years. She lamented her unfortunate fate and reluctantly gave him a piece of paper and a free book. But he tore the book apart and angrily rebuked her, "What do you think I am? Just throw it away if you want. What can I do if I can't throw it away? Accompany him on the path of seizing the throne and resume his old business. Just this time, my husband is much stronger, adhering to male virtues and not turning a blind eye to other women." Shi Anxia took the initiative to fill his harem, but he was still very angry. The capable husband managed the previous dynasty in an orderly manner, and Shi Anxia was very satisfied, still living a peaceful and happy life. Chapter 1. A lowly illegitimate child is her biological child. You are listening at novel full.audio. After Shi Anxia woke up, she found herself reborn to the age of 14, and the mansion was handling the funeral of her brother Shi Yunxing. She dressed in a white fox fur and walked slowly in the corridor of the Marquis' mansion. The white lantern under the corridor swayed gently with a flick of her finger. The maid Nan Yen quickly pushed Tang Posey into her hand and whispered, "Miss, don't be too sad. Hold on to your own body for now." Sad. Shi Anxia looked at the bleak sky and smiled. She's not sad, the one who died was not her own brother, but Aunt Wen's son. When Aunt Wen gave birth on the same day as Tang Shi, the mother of Shi Anxia, she changed her son's identity and became the legitimate son of the Marquis' mansion. And Shi Anxia's biological brother, Shi Yunxing, became a commoner and grew up tormented by Aunt Wen since childhood. Shi Anxia went to the memorial hall and saw Tang's eyes red and swollen from crying, kneeling on a cushion in agony. "Mother, I heard that you haven't closed your eyes for a few days. My daughter helped you return to your room to rest." Shi Anxia signaled to the maid and forcibly took Tang away. Tang cried and struggled all the way, "Xinger. My Xinger. I won't go back, I will keep my Xinger." Shi Anxia helped Tang Shi to the bed, held back the maid, and whispered in her ear, "Mother, don't cry. Shi Yunxing is not your son, nor is he my own brother." Upon hearing this, Tang's sobbing choked up halfway in his throat. "You. What nonsense are you talking about?" Shi Anxia sat by the bedside, reached out to hold Tang's hand, lifted her deep, well-like eyes, and once again clearly stated, "I say, Shi Yunxing is not your son at all, but the son of Aunt Wen." Tang was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth for a long time. "How did you know?" Shi Anxia had already figured out the wording. "My daughter was planning to go to her grandmother's house to pay her respects just now, but I accidentally heard my grandmother and Aunt Wen talking." "Does your grandmother also know?" Tang gritted her teeth and asked. "More than just knowing. Aunt Wen was already my grandmother's biological niece. Back then, you and Aunt Wen gave birth on the same day. If it weren't for my grandmother's intervention, she could have exchanged the two children so smoothly." Reviving her life, Shi Anxia was not angry anymore, but also grateful that everything was in time. Tang couldn't bear this breath, lifted the blanket and got out of bed, hoarsely saying, "I'm going to ask for justice now." Shi Anxia quickly stopped Tang Shi and said, "Mother, don't worry, justice can be sought slowly. If grandmother insists that it's not the case, what can we do? The most important thing in front of us is how to bring back brother Yunxi openly. I heard that brother Yunxi was beaten to death by Aunt Wen's whip and is still locked in the firewood shed." Tang's chest froze as he listened. As the legitimate wife of the second wife of the Marquis' mansion, she never treated her concubines and their children harshly. For the child who called Shi Yunxing, he once quietly showed kindness. That child is really heartbreaking, thin and timid. She once heard Aunt scold her son with her own ears, "You are just a lowly commoner. If you want to live well in the future, you must prioritize young Master Yunxing in everything. Even if he wants you to die, you have to endure it." At that time, Tang was quite moved after hearing these words. It is rare for a concubine to achieve this level in the world. Turns out, the truth is like this. That so-called lowly commoner is her biological child. Tang's heart was torn and painful, tears couldn't help but fall down. "Xia, what do you think should be done now?" Shi Anxia raised her hand to wipe away the tears on Tang's face and said, "Mother, if you believe me, let me handle it. My daughter will definitely handle it properly." Tang always felt that the daughter in front of her was somewhat different from what she used to look at. Her eyes were deep and indifferent, like a 1,000-year-old well, without waves, yet inexplicably reassuring. She nodded, her lowered eyes turning red again. Shi Anxia pondered for a moment and asked, "Who is handling the funeral ceremony now?" Tang replied, "Your grandmother hoped that I could use the power of the government to make the funeral ceremony more magnificent, so she left it all to me." "Well, then take advantage of the power of the government." Shi Anxia's eyes flickered and she said, "Can my mother lend me Grandma Zhong to use? The people from the Haitang courtyard, you can arrange as you please." Tang's eyes showed a hint of urgency. "Can you pick up your own brother earlier?" "Mother, don't worry, I will arrange it." "Don't let anyone see the clues," Shi Anxia whispered. "Now that Aunt Wen's ears and eyes are all over the Marquis' mansion, we can't make any mistakes." Tang suppressed his urgency and obediently responded, "Xia, your mother listens to you." Shi Anxia immediately sent Mama Zhong to the Duke's mansion to deliver a letter to her eldest aunt. At dusk, more than 30 people arrived from the government office in a grand manner. The maidservants and attendants, dressed in white mourning clothes, came to the Marquis' mansion to busy themselves in the funeral hall. The dark night was completely enveloped. The memorial hall is no longer open to entry and exit at will. In the rose garden, Aunt Wen's face was full of sadness. "Mom Lu, did you hear me? What is Tang doing?" Lu's mother replied, "Auntie, don't panic. Tang was so sad that she fainted a few times, and now she has returned to her courtyard to rest. I heard that Miss Anxia is in charge of the funeral now. The Zigua mansion has sent people to help, as if to welcome Master Hongda." Aunt Wen's face softened and she said, "It should have been like this long ago. Xing'er is already the grandson of their mansion, how can she ignore it? After inviting Master Hongda to make a peace of mind, it seems that she has finally taken her heart. Auntie is relieved. With the blessing of Master Hongda, young Master Xing will definitely have a good baby in his next life, enjoying endless wealth and honor throughout his life." Upon hearing these words, Aunt Wen felt a sense of sadness and planned to wait for 16 years. She watched as the flowers and fruits finally bloomed, but the people were gone, and in the end, everything was in vain. After a moment, Lu's mother reported again that Master Hongda had come, but he stayed for less than half a pillar of incense before leaving with a group of monks. Aunt Wen didn't understand and said, "The Requiem Transcendence technique takes at least an hour. How could it be so fast?" Lu's mother shook her head and said, "No matter how much information we have, we won't be able to find out. The people guarding outside are all from the government. We can't get in, and we don't know what's going on inside. Let's go, take a look." Aunt Wen gathered her hair in a bun, put on an outer coat, and braved the wind and snow to go to the funeral hall. A stranger's mother blocked her way and said, "Please stay, no one can enter the memorial hall without Miss Anxia's command." Aunt Wen's face turned black. She has been in charge of the Marquis' mansion for several years and has been like a fish in water in the mansion. No servant disrespects her 3 times. Now I was blocked by a servant and couldn't swallow his breath. Go and call out Shi Anxia. I'll see if she can let me in on Earth. The mother remained calm and steady, still blocking the way. May I ask who you are from this mansion? You look like an ant in your attire. For a legitimate young lady, an ant is actually just like us, a servant. Aunt Wen's eyes turned green with anger. How dare the dog servant of the government dare to say she is a servant? Which slave can wear such good brocade clothing? Where does she look like an ant? She was extremely angry and habitually slapped her hand. Just that slap in the air, unable to fall for a long time. Chapter 2. Aunties are not like aunties. You are listening at novel-full.audio. Aunt Wen's hand was tightly clamped in the air by the unfamiliar mother, unable to move. A cold voice sounded in my ear. A lady who is not good at standing on the stage in the Marquis' mansion also wants to beat people in the Duke's mansion at will. Did you learn this rule from the dog's stomach? Lu's mother saw the situation was not good, so she quickly stepped forward to help her master break free from shackles. The rules of the Guogong mansion don't seem very good, even a servant. Shi Anxia covered her gloomy eyes and slowly walked out of the shadows. It was my mother Zheng who I had worked so hard to ask for help from the government. Is it Lu's mother who has an opinion, or is it Wen's aunt who has an opinion? Why don't we go talk to my grandmother? Aunt Wen also calmed down at this moment. It's really embarrassing to argue with a servant like this again. Moreover, the other party is still from the government, and if there is a big trouble, it will be her who will suffer. She tried hard to create a calm expression, feeling very aggrieved. Sister Xia, this is all a misunderstanding. I'll just forget it, don't disturb the old lady's rest. Shi Anxia's lips curled up when she heard the words, Aunt Wen, it's best not to make things difficult for the people of the Duke's mansion in the future. They were all hired by me after putting my mother's face on them. Now that the Marquis' mansion is understaffed, Aunt Wen should know better than anyone else. In the first few days, Tang requested to send more people to handle the funeral ceremony, but Aunt Wen wanted the government to send someone to give Shi Yunxing a long face. She used the excuse that there were not enough people in the government and asked Tang to find a solution on her own. Aunt Wen was suffocated by the blockage and couldn't find a reason to refute it. She had to change her tone and ask, did Master Hongda come just now? Shi Anxia nodded without hesitation, not wanting to reveal a word. Aunt Wen asked, why did you leave before half a pillar of incense arrived? Shi Anxia gathered her long fur and responded coldly, Aunt Wen, please go back. Don't ask what shouldn't be asked, and don't worry about what shouldn't be. There are some things that Aunt Wen shouldn't worry about. You. Aunt Wen leaned back in anger, Shi Anxia, don't forget who is in charge of this family. Pa. Zheng's mother couldn't help but slap Aunt Wen's face. There's no rules. Is the girl's name something that Aunt Wen can call casually? Shi Anxia smiled warmly and said, yes, my aunt is not like an ant. Is it possible that you want to say that you are the one in charge of the Tang Marquis' mansion? Aunt Wen covered her face in anger and didn't utter a word to refute her. She only let out a resentful voice and said, Mom Lu, let's go. She has been in charge of the feedbacks for several years, but on the surface, it is always the old lady who stands out. If it were to be spread that the Marquis' mansion was led by an ant, then the Marquis' mansion wouldn't have such a face. The old lady has reminded her to act low-key and never let her down, and the servants in the mansion have been severely beaten. She was just in a moment of desperation, wanting to use her position as the head of the family to suppress Shi Anxia. Who would have thought they only treated her as an ant? That stinky girl didn't know what medicine she had taken wrong, so she suddenly got into a fight with her. It's not like this in the past. I must have tasted the sweetness of being the principal, and as soon as I gained the right to hold the funeral ceremony, I started to curl my tail. After all, he has shallow eyelids. Aunt Wen walked slowly, and when she heard Anxia behind her, she was explaining things to Zheng's mother. I'm going out of the mansion now to invite Mr. Yang Xian to help my brother with his indulgence. Could you please take care of it together with Manager Liao? Zheng's mother respectfully replied, Miss, you have spoken seriously. I will do my best to take care of my duties. Before coming, our wife also reminded me that everything should be arranged by Mississippi. Antoine walked away and asked, Mr. Yangxian. That famous feng shui master in the capital. Last time, the old lady asked me to invite you to come and see the house, and it took me several days to receive a definite message that I was not available. I'm only going to invite someone at this time, can I still be invited? Don't miss the good time to rest your soul. Lu's mother agreed, yes, we can't delay the time. However, if the young lady invites someone in the name of the protectorate, she may not be able to succeed. Antoine was panicked and whispered in tears, I hope it can be. My hard-earned son. She cried until the end, her eyes turning crimson. That girl from the Wei family must be buried with my son. This night, the wind and snow were raging, and the lights in the Marquis' mansion were brightly lit. Antoine finally heard the good news, and Mr. Yangxian came. Her heart falls to the ground. Being able to perform a requiem transcendence before midnight is also considered auspicious. Just as she was so tired that she couldn't help but squint her eyes, it was almost dawn. Shi Anxia stayed up all night. The memorial hall of the Marquis' mansion in Maosher was withdrawn, and the coffin was carried away by the back door, leaving its whereabouts unknown. When the old lady and Antoine received the news after dawn, they even removed the white lanterns and plain gauze from the handmade corridor. As soon as Shi Anxia helped Tang Shi enter the old lady's courtyard, she heard Antoine reporting hard, Auntie, what do you think Tang Shi and Sister Xia are going to do? It's only the 4th day today. Everyone has been evacuated. Everyone has been evacuated, and funeral items have also been evacuated. Antoine was too lazy to cover up at this time, sobbing and wailing, for days. This is only the 4th day. The funeral ceremony has not been half done, so we just casually and carelessly. Shi Anxia and Tang Shi gave a perfunctory salute to Mrs. Shi, who had a very unpleasant expression, and then sat in a nearby chair. Shi Anxia wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, her voice tinged with fatigue and hoarseness. Antoine really has feelings for brother Yunxing. I don't know, but I thought it was Antoine's son who died, she said. Antoine was startled by the words, and a mournful cry suddenly stuck in her throat. Upon hearing these words, Mrs. Shi felt very guilty and tried to smooth things out by saying, who in this mansion doesn't care about brother Xing? Antoine has the softest temperament, so it's only natural for her to be sad. Shi Anxia sneered inwardly, but obediently said, Grandma said so. Antoine even personally whipped brother Yunqi because of my brother's death, which shows that Antoine respected and understood etiquette. When Antoine brought up this matter, she gritted her teeth with hatred, and the anger in her heart had nowhere to vent. I wish he could replace Xing'er to die. She then looked at Shi Anxia with resentment and if he hadn't gone to save you, he wouldn't have cared about Xing'er's life or death. Tang said leisurely, my Xia heir's fate is also fate. Without hesitation, Antoine blurted out, of course, it's the legitimate son's life that matters. Tang ignored her and only looked up at Shi Anxia, warning, after all, it was Qi Gur who saved your life. In the future, you should remember to treat Qi Gur as well as your own brother. Did you hear that? Shi Anxia obediently replied, remember, mother. I will definitely treat brother Yunqi well. Antoine is going crazy when these mother and daughter sing and harmonize. But the old lady's opinion is different. Last night, I heard that the government had sent someone to help manage the funeral ceremony, and I also heard that Master Hongda had been invited to Hun Chaodu. I was satisfied with the Tang family's mother and daughter. But for some reason, the memorial hall was withdrawn overnight, and the coffin was also missing. I think there must be hidden secrets inside. She asked Tang, Chu Jun, can you tell me why the mourning ceremony was withdrawn before it expired? Tang Shi, also known as Chu Jun, cried heartily before she could answer. Shi Anxia had no choice but to go forward and comfort her mother, while responding to the old lady's words, "Grandmother, this is how things are." Chapter 3. Overwhelming Wealth and Nobility. You are listening at novel-full.audio. The custom of the Northern Wing Kingdom is that on the third day after a person's death, monks should recite scriptures and pray for blessings, transcend the dead, and stabilize the soul. Shi Anxia spoke in a gentle tone. "Last night, my granddaughter invited Master Hongda to come to the Marquis' mansion in the name of the Duke's mansion for transcendence. Unexpectedly, Master Hongda shook his head after seeing his brother's birth date and said that he couldn't transcend, so he left. Later, my granddaughter approached Mr. Yunxing again. The master came to see my brother's body and said that he shouldn't have died so early, but he couldn't bear the overwhelming wealth that came out of thin air. He forcibly modified his destiny, which led to this mishap. In the whole room, the air froze to the point where even a needle could be heard falling." Shi Anxia raised her confused eyes and looked at Mrs. Shi. "Grandmother, what do you mean by Mr. Yunxing's words? What does it mean to forcibly modify one's destiny?" Mrs. Shi awkwardly touched her own forehead, avoiding her granddaughter's gaze. "Mr. Feng Shui, just listen to half of what he said. How can you believe everything?" Shi Anxia nodded obediently and said, "Grandmother is right. But it's better to trust what she has than what she doesn't. It's related to the health of her grandparents and the fortune of the Marquis' mansion, so my granddaughter still listened to Mr. Feng Shui." Tang let out a whimper at the right moment, wiping away her tears with sadness. "I don't agree. I don't agree with what you're doing." Shi Anxia quickly knelt down and leaned over to Lady Shi's side. With red eyes, she advised, "Mother, we need to understand the big picture. Although my brother is important, my grandparents' health cannot be ignored, and the fortune of the Marquis' mansion cannot be ignored." Mrs. Shi didn't understand. Why did this matter involve her and the old Marquis' health, as well as the fortune of the Marquis' mansion? She pulled Shi Anxia to her side and asked, "What did Mr. Yunxing say?" Shi Anxia wiped away a tear, put away the silk, and answered with a straight and round tone, "Sir said that my brother's funeral must stop immediately, and he cannot enter the ancestral tomb. He also needs to find 2 men who can control the fortune of the Marquis' mansion to bury his brother personally on the Lingshan mountain in the western suburbs. Otherwise, it will ruin the longevity of my grandparents and even affect the future prospects of the Marquis' mansion." Madame Shi was the most afraid of death, and upon hearing this, she felt a cold sweat on her back. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and find someone to bury you." Shi Anxia replied, "Originally, I was looking for my father and brother Yunqi, but to my surprise, my father was not in the mansion. Mr. Yunxing said that there would be no delay, so I could only ask uncle and brother Yunqi to take brother Yunxing to Lingshan. Aunt Wan is very angry." "What kind of ghost place is Lingshan?" "The location of the mass grave. Those buried in that place are all despicable lives." Before she could speak, Tang burst into tears again. "I don't agree. I don't agree with what you're doing. My Xingge has been pampered since childhood, how can he be buried in a place like Lingshan?" Madame Shi waved her hand and said, "As you said, Xingge has been pampered since childhood. Now that he has been broken, he happens to go to the Ling mountain to raise his soul. Maybe he can have a good pregnancy." At this moment, she also understood that she was just a fallen illegitimate son, and compared to her longevity in the future of the Marquis' mansion, it was simply not worth mentioning. Aunt Wan was stunned and couldn't get in touch for a moment. Tang has said everything she wants to say for her. Shi Anxia looked at Aunt Wan and lowered her head to cover the indifferent light in her eyes. "Yes, it's important to be alive. Mother, as the legitimate wife of the second wife of the Marquis' mansion and the biological mother of brother Yunxing, you cannot secretly set up a sacrificial altar in the inner room, otherwise it will also affect the feng shui of the Marquis' mansion." Tang shook his fingers in anger and said, That's your own brother. How could you, how could you? I shouldn't have handed over Xing'er's funeral to you." Shi Anxia looked aggrieved and dodged towards Mrs. Shi, looking scared after being scolded. The old lady only felt that her granddaughter was particularly pleasing today, and everything was based on the elderly's longevity and health. She couldn't help but take her hand and comfort her. "Don't be afraid, with my grandmother around, no one can bully you." She shouted and ordered, "If anyone in the mansion sets up a sacrificial altar for incense, don't blame me for being merciless." Tang Shi still wanted to say something, but eventually held back, just lowered her head and silently shed tears. Antoine couldn't understand how the old lady who had always loved her eldest grandson could become so ruthless. But she didn't dare to speak at this moment, just secretly made up her mind to kill Shi Yunxing and throw him to Lingshan to accompany her son. Shi Anxia saw that the matter had been explained clearly and supported her mother to retire. When going out, Tang Shi angrily shook off his daughter's hand and refused to let her help. Shi Anxia had no choice but to look back at the old lady and pout. Mrs. Shi nodded and comforted, "Mother and daughter, there's no overnight feud. How lenient are you in your mother's heart?" Shi Anxia obediently replied, "Grandma, rest assured that I will be by my mother's side these days and not let her think recklessly." The old lady was at ease now, and with her granddaughter watching, Tang Shi might be able to calm down a bit. When the mother and daughter walked away, the old lady held back her servants and instructed the capable Li Mama beside her to investigate the truth. After Li Mama left, Antoine looked at the empty space and spoke sadly, "Auntie." When the old man was so angry, he slapped her in the face and said, "It's all you. You had to ask the old man to change your son for you back then, but what happened? Your son's despicable life couldn't withstand that extraordinary wealth and prosperity, which led to his premature death. What a sin! It even ruined the feng shui of our Marquis' mansion. The more I think about it, the more it happens. Since the exchange of the two children, everything in the Marquis' mansion has been going wrong, and her son Shi Qingxuan's career has been in a mess, making it difficult for her to ask the Marquis to confer the title of Crown Prince on him." Antoine covered her face and said, "Maybe it was that girl who made up this to deceive you." "Fool! How could she possibly use this to deceive me?" Mrs. Shi scolded angrily, "Xingde is her own brother, Tang Chujuan's own son. No one wants Xingde better than them." Antoine also wanted to say whether there was something missing that they knew the truth about, so they deliberately acted like this. But looking at the selfish and harsh face of the old lady, she swallowed her words forcefully. When she suggested changing her son back then, the old lady immediately accepted it without hesitation, thinking that the legitimate grandson of the Marquis' mansion was from her maternal family. It's all her aunt's fault for what happened in this meeting. Can someone who works as an aunt easily change her child? Li Mama lowered her eyes and whispered back, "Master Hongda did indeed come to the memorial hall last night. He didn't stay for half a pillar of incense, so he hurriedly left with a group of monks. Later, the young lady sent someone to invite Mr. Yang Xian, but he couldn't be invited. It was the young lady who personally went out of the mansion to invite him back in the middle of the night." Although Shi Anxia surrounded the memorial hall, there were still many servants from the Marquis' mansion working inside. These things are not difficult to inquire about and cannot be falsified. The old lady had little doubt at the time, but now that she has received a response, the last bit of doubt has been dispelled. Li Mama said again, "I heard that Mr. Yang Xian is now being placed in the guest house. The young lady said that she wants Mr. Yang Xian to show us the feng shui of the Marquis' mansion and see if there are any areas that need to be adjusted." The old lady felt extremely comforted upon hearing this. Mr. Yang Xian was once the person she invited but couldn't come. Now he is living in the Marquis' mansion as a guest, probably because of the face of the Duke's mansion. She also thought of her granddaughter's swift handling of affairs. Seeing that she was involved in the future of her elders Shou Yuan and the Marquis' mansion, she resisted the pressure and quickly withdrew from the funeral hall. It was evident that she was a capable person, and she couldn't help but nod, "This girl is stronger than her mother." Antoine was so hateful that tears streamed down her face, but she dared not say anything bad about Shi Anxia. Chapter 4. What kind of person is Shi Yunxing? You are listening at novel full.audio. Shi Anxia fell ill from falling into the water in her previous life and fell into a coma for 7 days before waking up. Tang Chujun wanted to be strong, but he didn't want to cause trouble for his elder brother. He stood alone and arranged a funeral for Shi Yunxing, but in the end, he ended up complaining. Mrs. Shi and Aunt Wan both felt that the government did not show respect and the funeral was not grand enough. Tang Chujun was originally a reserved person, and the pain of losing her son made her even more melancholic and sickly. Soon after, she followed suit. But Shi Anxia always suspected that her mother's death was suspicious, but there was no evidence to prove that Aunt Wan had used any means. In this life, she wanted to make her mother live longer and happier no matter what, and not be killed by this dilapidated Marquis mansion. Shi Anxia carefully helped Tang Chujun sit down and instructed Nan Yen to bring bird's nest and personally feed her mother. Since Tang Chujun learned the truth about changing his son, the depression in his chest has eased a lot. Now that I have free time, I really feel hungry. So I reached out to take the bowl and took a bite to eat. Xia, is your brother settled? Can you please ask a doctor for treatment? Shi Anxia smiled and said, Mother, do you still feel uneasy about uncle's work? Upon hearing this, Tang Chujun's face turned red, and a hint of sadness flashed through his eyes before disappearing. Your uncle is reliable, but after all, we are from the second bedroom. The old lady doesn't like to see your uncle. In Shi Anxia's mind, the proud posture of Uncle Shi Qingyi, who was as cold as a bamboo, came to mind. Compared to his own father, it was truly a difference of clouds and mud. In her past life, she floated and sank in the deep palace, entering and exiting the cold palace several times. If it weren't for this uncle's family consistently defending her and taking care of her outside the palace, she would never have been able to sit in the position of Empress Dowager and become the ultimate winner. At that time, she thought how great it would be if uncle were her biological father. Uncle is her confidence. In this life, the honor that should belong to the uncle will be returned in its original form. She will never let her father, who is unable to support the wall with mud, do things that are not on the table under the glory of the Marquis mansion. Shi Anxia's thoughts drifted a bit far away, and she met her mother's inquisitive gaze and said sweetly, Mother, please be relieved. Uncle has already placed my brother in the Tongan Medical Center as I said, and with Dr. Shen taking care of him, there should be no problem. I will definitely let my brother come back to you openly. What if Aunt Wan asks you for someone? Shi Anxia raised her eyebrows lightly, her eyes curved, and said, Then I need to ask her for silver to treat my brother's illness. Tang Chujun was teased to the point where he burst out with a faint smile. Today, she was so angry with you that she skipped her feet. I'm sure she won't give up easily. Shi Anxia calmly poured a cup of hot tea and held it in her hand to keep warm, without any fear. I'm just afraid she'll give up and do nothing, she said. Xia. Tang Chujun put down his bowl and wiped the corners of his mouth with a handkerchief, looking at his daughter with heartache. You just fell into a serious illness and shouldn't work hard. There are still many troubles to come, so let's take care of them. After pondering for a moment, Shi Anxia asked, Does my mother really know what kind of person Shi Yunxing is? You know. Right. Tang Chujun lacked confidence upon hearing his daughter's words. Regardless of whether Shi Yunxing is her biological son or not, being a mother for these years is ultimately not very competent. Due to Shi Qingshuan's relationship, she is too negligent and indifferent towards her children. Especially for this daughter. I owe even more. Until Shi Yunxing died, she was tormented to death by the excruciating pain of losing her child. Only then did she deeply understand that no matter who their father was, their children were the people she longed for the most in her heart. After thinking for a moment, she replied, All I know is that Xing'er is a child who likes to take shortcuts. Shi Anxia corrected, That's not just opportunism, it's reckless behavior. Mother, please continue. Tang Chujun had a feeling of being picked up by a nurturing mother for assessment when he was a child. He likes to listen to compliments from others. No, he just likes to hear compliments from others. He is a bit stubborn and doesn't like reading. That's called learning without skill. He had some talent when he was a child. That was my brother's innate talent. All his poems and essays were written by my brother. Ah. Really? Tang Chujun exclaimed in surprise. Thinking of her son suffering under her nose for 16 years, she couldn't help but burst into tears without realizing it. For a moment, crying and laughing. Shi Anxia rubbed her eyebrows and suddenly understood why her mother was calculated by her grandmother to become the wife of her father, Shi Yunxing. It's really too lacking in heart and mind. Shi Anxia said solemnly, the reason why Shi Yunxing fell into the water and died is entirely due to his own fault, and he cannot blame anyone else. This son not only lacks knowledge and skills, but also behaves recklessly and has no sense of shame. Earlier, he fell in love with Wei Kailing, the legitimate daughter of Wei Zhongshi, the head of the Ministry of Works. However, he found the other party's social status too low and refused to marry openly. He only wanted to take them as his concubine. Although Wei Zhongshi was only a 6th-rank official in the capital, he was also a pure and upright family. And the Wei family has a clean and upright family tradition. How can such a disciple be humiliated? Not to mention being a concubine, even if she lifts a sedan chair to welcome her as a legitimate wife, she is unwilling to do so. On that day, when Shi Yunxing heard that Wei Kailing was going out to offer incense at Wanfo Temple, he had malicious intentions and prepared to arrest someone to destroy the girl's innocence. So, the girl had to go to the Marquis' mansion and become a concubine. Shi Yunxing learned the news from somewhere and hurriedly came to report it to Shi Anxia, then rushed together to save the person. Unexpectedly, as soon as we reached Changfu Road in the southern suburbs, we saw Wei Kailing jump into the river. The maids brought by Wei Kailing also jumped down one after another, and for a moment, the screams of girls were everywhere in the river. Shi Yunxing relied on his good water quality and also chased after the water. The water flow is turbulent, and a girl is getting farther and farther away from the water. Shi Anxia didn't think much and ran along the shore for a while before jumping into the water, trying to pull the girl up. When she jumped down, although she grabbed the girl's hand, her strength was too weak to pull at all. Seeing both girls being washed further away by the water, Shi Yunxing panicked and quickly jumped into the water to save people. In this commotion, the people from the surrounding villages gathered around to watch the excitement, pulling out all the girls from the water. Finally, Shi Anxia realized that only Shi Yunxing had not landed. When she returned to the mansion to call for help, only the body of Shi Yunxing was salvaged. At this moment, the cold wind outside the window is piercing, and the sky is filled with flying snow, which is charming to the eyes. Shi Anxia carefully broke up and kneaded Shi Yunxing's actions to tell Tang Chujun. Tang Chujun was so shocked that he couldn't come back to his senses. She was not clear about the background at first. She knows her son is naughty and doesn't love reading, but how could she know that she would be shameless for this? I don't even know that Aunt Wen usually teaches others the same thing before and behind, and keeps her completely hidden. If it weren't for my daughter, she might have been kept in the dark for her entire life. She remembered that her daughter had also hinted earlier that her brother was not suitable for outsiders and hoped that her mother would impose more constraints. But at that time, she thought her son was just a mischievous teenager, so she slapped him in the mouth. What she didn't know was that when she turned around, her son went to teach Shi Anxia a lesson, telling her not to meddle in her affairs and not to report, otherwise she would be seen as good-looking. When Shi Anxia saw that her mother was indifferent, she also calmed down and hid from the plague god. Upon learning the truth, Tang Chujun felt extremely ashamed. After all, it's a child raised by oneself. What's the difference between doing such a thing and that thug? He cursed repeatedly, this villain. This villain. How dare he? Shi Anxia pushed a cup of hot tea to Tang Chujun and smiled warmly. Mother, why are you so excited? It's not your own son. Chapter 5. The girl wants to do big things. You are listening at novel full.audio. Tang Chujun sighed and said, on the day Xing'er died, your grandmother and Aunt Wen mentioned the Wei family. At that time, my mind was very confused, so I didn't pay attention and didn't know what she was going to do. Shi Anxia said, grandmother and Aunt Wen naturally want to ruin Miss Wei's reputation. In her past life, Anxia struggled in the water and fell ill, while her mother Tang Chujun cried all day due to her son's accidental death. Mrs. Shi and Aunt Wen learned from the servant who followed Shi Yunxing about the causes and consequences of this falling into the water. Not only did they not apologize to the Wei family, but they also sent a person named Zhang Qigu to the entrance of the Wei mansion to cause trouble. It is rumored that the legitimate grandson of the Marquis' mansion, Shi Yunxing, died to save Miss Wei, and Miss Wei had already given her body to their young master Yunxing. Wei Kailing did not resist the rumors and chose to commit suicide to prove her innocence. And this did not stop the Marquis' mansion from continuing to do evil. Surprisingly, when Lady Shi and Aunt Wen were holding a funeral ceremony in the Wei mansion, they invited a matchmaker to play matchmaker and go to the Wei mansion to hire them, intending to marry Shi Yunxing and Wei Kailing in the underworld. Madame Wei couldn't escape the insult from the Marquis' mansion when she saw her daughter die. She was extremely angry and spat out a mouthful of blood on the coffin, feeling extremely angry on the spot. After Shi Anxia recovered from his illness, he learned about this matter and wanted to remedy it. Lord Wei and his family have been transferred from the capital. 10 years later, Wei Pingting, the younger sister of the Wei family, was selected into the palace with a stunning appearance. Various means emerged to deal with the Marquis' mansion and Shi Anxia, but in the end, they both suffered losses. Shi Anxia entered the cold palace, and Wei Pingting lost her holy favor for using the dragon fetus in her belly to seek revenge. She was ultimately killed by a glass of poisonous wine. In the end, it seemed like she won, but in fact, everyone lost. Having a clear stream like Wei Zhongshe is truly a blessing for the northern wing. In the face of the country's destruction, the Wei family abandoned their old grudges and followed the Empress Dowager's instructions to fight against the enemy. How could she bear to let Wei Zhongshe bear the pain of losing his daughter and wife again in this life? Tang Chujun didn't rush to solve the problem anymore. Xia, what do you think we should do next? If someone goes to the Wei mansion, Miss Wei will be forced to death. Shi Anxia nodded and said, exactly. If my mother trusts me, will she let me handle this matter? Tang Chujun saw that although his daughter was young, she handled affairs cleanly and efficiently, and acted with a relaxed and moderate manner, which seemed much more stable and skilled than herself. What else is there to worry about? Immediately respond. After discussing it, Shi Anxia had someone call Chao's mother over. She returned most of the staff from the government office in the morning, leaving only a few capable managers from Chao Mama. Chao's mother was brought by Shi Anxia's eldest aunt from her mother's house to the government office. Her own master and sister-in-law's niece are good friends, and she will spare no effort in handling matters. She came in and bowed respectfully, greetings to Madam, greetings to Mississippi. Shi Anxia stood up and smiled as she helped her up. No need to be too polite. From now on, I will rely on Chao's mother to help me train the maids around me, so that they can also act like Chao's mother and make people feel at ease. Chao's mother received praise, and her old face wrinkled with a smile. The girl is praised too much, but it's up to her to do it, she said when the servants of the Guogong mansion returned in the morning. Everyone was happy. Because the girl not only gave each person a red envelope to hide, but also gave out silver rewards and cloth. They are servants, and doing things is their duty. But if the host gives more rewards, it indicates recognition of their ability to handle things. Chao's mother had always held a high regard for the girl in her heart. The series of actions taken last night can truly be called calm and bold, unlike the little girl who is afraid of her hands and feet when she is still young. Although she didn't know why the girl treated her elder brother so badly, which wealthy family had nothing dirty in their backyard. During contemplation, Chao's mother saw several maids enter the room. Shi Anxia said, "I'm not afraid of being laughed at by Chao Mama. Now, the only trusted and useful people in my courtyard are these maids. I wonder if Chao Mama can assign a few trustworthy people to take care of them separately." She paused for a moment and then said, "Next, what I'm going to do may be very secretive and there can be no mistakes." Chao's mother understood that if the girl wants to do something big, the whole mansion may soon be completely overturned. After a moment of contemplation, she nodded and said, "I have a clear idea in my heart." The girl left 8 slightly older women in the morning, assigned 5 to come out, and added herself with 3. Then she asked, "Do you want the rest to stay in the begonia garden?" Shi Anxia nodded and said, "Mom Chao is right." Among these maids, there are 4 first-class maids, namely Dongxi, Xie, Nanyan, and Beifan. Among them, Beihui has the best relationship with her. The other 3 were chosen by her mother before, so loyalty is not a problem. There is also a maid named Hongkei, who is a second-class maid. Shi Anxia wants to promote Red Magpie to a first-class maid after this matter is completed. Based on her past life memories, none of these maids have ever stabbed her in the back. There is actually a second-class girl named Green Parrot who not only does bed climbing, but also becomes someone else's minion against her. She had to pick a mistake and sell someone like this. Several maids all bowed to Chao's mother and said, "I've seen Chao's mother." Chao's mother smiled and said, "Then come with me. I will choose the right person and teach you how to act alone and do things well for the girl." After saying this, she bowed again and said, "Madam, girl, I'm leaving." Shi Anxia nodded slightly and sat in a dignified posture. "Thank you very much, Mom Chao, for taking the trouble." At the moment when Chao's mother left, she inexplicably sensed the girl's inviolable dignity. At that time, Aunt One was sitting on a soft chair, instructing the servant to whip Sister Guifei, who was guarding the firewood shed. With each whip, there was a scream mixed in. Aunt One raised her hand to signal the servant to stop, and angrily asked, "Why hasn't Shi Yunxing disappeared and you haven't reported it in time?" Sister Guifei feels bitter in her heart. "Last night, my sister.In.Law came to ask for money from her again, threatening that my mother had a high fever and would go to the hospital to see a doctor. She said she didn't have any money and asked her sister.In.Law to find her brother to find a solution. Why should the 3 brothers in the family ask her, who is the sister.In.Law, to give money? When my sister.In.Law saw that she couldn't get the money, she made a sarcastic remark that her old age was useless and couldn't keep a man's heart. What does she mean by asking her sister.In.Law? My sister.In.Law may have said to stimulate her and make her uncomfortable, "Why don't you go home and take a look yourself?" Guifei thought that since the young master is usually locked in the firewood room without anyone paying attention, he will not go out himself. Plus, he's so injured that he can't run around at all. She locked the firewood room and hurried home. As a result, she saw her husband and her good cousin enjoying themselves in bed. His husband is a carpenter with poor craftsmanship and cannot handle many jobs throughout the year. She is a woman who sold herself to the Marquis' mansion as a slave, earning money to support her husband, children, sister.In.Law, and parents-in-law. Now it seems like we still need to have an extra cousin. Her poor and destitute family, her husband still wants to learn from the wealthy family to beg for help. She became angrier and angrier as she thought, causing trouble for half the night. When I returned in the morning, I found out that the lock of the firewood room had been smashed and that the young master had been taken away by the master. Before she could report to Aunt One sent someone to arrest her. Ah! With another whip, Sister Guifei curled up on the ground in pain. "Auntie, spare your life, I didn't mean to." Antoine blushed with crimson eyes and said, "Go find someone to sell this slut to the dirtiest and most tiring place." Shi Anxia had been standing by the door for half a day and couldn't help but leisurely say, "Aunt doesn't like Sister Guifei, why don't you give it to me?" Chapter 6. The girl can predict things like God. You are listening at novel full.audio. Antoine suddenly turned her head and saw Shi Anxia standing at the door, with a playful and malicious smile on her face. "Miss, are you going to snatch someone from me?" she said with a chill in her heart. Shi Anxia asked in surprise, "Isn't Auntie going to sell Sister Guifei? My courtyard is currently short of people, so there's no need for such trouble. Just give me the deed of identity, there's no need to sell it." Antoine then slowly drew a wry smile, "So, the eldest lady finally knows who is the final say of this family." Shi Anxia smiled sincerely and said, "I'll say it's okay soon." "What does it mean?" Literal meaning. Shi Anxia's lips were red and teeth were white, like pink plums blooming in the wind and snow. Antoine felt a little uneasy when she heard it. Shi Anxia's eyebrows and eyes were tinged with a lazy smile. "How about I trade you with a girl?" Antoine didn't want to, no change. Which servant's body deed in this mansion is not in her hands, why should she exchange it with a yellow-haired girl? Shi Anxia lowered her eyelids and said, "If I don't change, then I'll leave." After she finished speaking, she turned around and went out. The maids and women who followed behind her also hurriedly followed. The only woman with a raw face frowned and looked back several times at the situation inside the room. The gaze was sharp and puzzled for a moment, then fell on Antoine's face, with a faint hint of disdain. Finally, he shook his head and followed. Antoine was flustered by those glances, and for a moment, she took note of Anxia's hurried arrival and departure. "Lu Mama, who is that person? What expression is that on her face?" Lu's mother is a personal genius, and she has long inquired about it. She was also transferred from the government office by the eldest lady, known as Tan's mother. Now she is left as a clerk in the summer palace and follows the eldest lady in and out. I heard that many people were punished as soon as she left. Antoine's face looks ugly. It's really easy to invite gods, but difficult to send them away. How could she still brazenly hold on to the feed-forward like before when the people from the Duke's mansion moved in? Lu's mother said, "I guess the young lady is going to report to the old lady. Due to her reputation, the old lady will soon take back the ownership of the family. So, Sister Guifei cannot sell her temporarily. Since the young lady wants it, let's give it to her. Damn it." Antoine was so angry that she slapped Sister Guifei in the face. "You bitch. You must have had regular contact with that stinky girl. Otherwise, how could she protect you?" Sister Guifei was covered in scars and curled up on the ground, murmuring, "I haven't. I've never said a word to Mississippi." Antoine doesn't believe these things, and already sees Sister Guifei as a thorn in her side. "You'll go to the summer palace to find Miss in a while and say I've agreed to let you go and work there," she said. Guifei lifted her blue eyes in surprise. Antoine looked down from above and said, "I remember your husband is a carpenter. There is a job at the East Street ready-to-wear shop. You can arrange for him to go find my maternal brothers tomorrow." Sister Guifei immediately understood, and asked the maidservants to go to the summer palace. Antoine gave her a disdainful glance and said, "Miss, if there is any movement, you should come and report it as soon as possible. If it's a mistake, I can't guarantee that your family will have to deal with everything." Sister Guifei was greatly surprised. She can ignore the life and death of her man, as well as her in-laws and aunts, but she cannot ignore her daughter. A touch of sadness surged in my heart, and people like them were ultimately just tools for others. In less than 15 minutes, Sister Guifei was sent to the summer palace. Tan's mother smiled and praised, "The girl is really well prepared." Shi Anxia lifted the tea lid, brushed open the foam, took a soft sip, and smiled faintly. "It must be Tan Mama who cooperated well with those few eyes," she said. Tan's mother smiled, and the maid standing beside her also chuckled along. Shi Anxia pointed to the group of maids and said, "You guys, don't just keep smiling. Learn more from Tan's mother. How can you handle things without saying a word?" The maids all responded together, "Yes." Shi Anxia took another sip of tea with satisfaction. Just an aunt, the head of the family's name is not legitimate and not smooth, and spreading it may damage the reputation of the Marquis' mansion. Can't you be careful to hold on to this extravagant wealth and status? This is because in the past, no one deliberately instigated it. Otherwise, even if the Marquis' family held power and the Tang family did not want it, there would still be an eldest aunt above, 3 aunts and 4 aunts below. Which round would we get an aunt to show off her power? Sister Guifei was brought in with injuries all over her body, crouching and her forehead resting on the ground. "I have seen Miss, thank you for saving her life," she said. Shi Anxia said, "Don't thank me. If you want to thank me, thank you for your usual kindness." The first thing young master wakes up is to ask where Sister Guifei is, and if he has been punished for it. "Master Qi is a top-notch person," said Mrs. Guifei with tears streaming down her face. She never remembered for a moment what kind things she had done to the young master. She just slipped him half a cold mantou when he was too hungry. When he was extremely hot and thirsty, she quietly gave him half a bowl of cold water to drink. Otherwise, she had no ability to do it. Shi Anxia didn't bother with her and said, "You take care of your injuries in the summer palace first. When your injuries are healed, you will go and serve the young master. Would you be willing to?" However, Guifei was thinking about how to tell the young lady that she had been blackmailed into being the ears and eyes of Aunt 1. Shi Anxia saw that Sister Guifei had not responded for a long time and knew what was going on inside. "You don't have to worry, the people standing here are all those I trust. You can speak with confidence," she said. Sister Guifei just lifted her head and paraphrased Aunt Wen's words, then cried and kowtowed, "I can ignore others, but my daughter is only 9 years old." "Do you mean that only your daughter is the person you care about? Do you not care about others' lives or deaths?" Guifei remembered last night when her in-laws spoke ill of her. "My sister.In-law mocked her and even slandered her for having a good relationship in the Marquis' mansion. Her husband even punched and kicked her, saying that she was a chicken that didn't lay eggs and couldn't even give birth to a son." Her good cousin shamelessly fanned the flames and said, "In the future, I will be the one to continue the incense of the Guifei family, don't you think, cousin?" Mrs. Guifei looked into the young lady's eyes and said, "Yes. That's easy to handle." Shi Anxia frowned slightly. "In a few days, you can go back and tell your husband that I need to add someone to my summer palace, sign a sales contract, which costs 7 taels of silver per person, and there is also 21 per month. Let your sister.In-law come and try it out." Guifei didn't understand. "Why did my sister.In-law come?" Tan's mother explained on the side, "If you ask your sister.In-law to sign the contract of sale, she will definitely argue with you. She will encourage your husband to sell your daughter into our mansion. When your daughter's contract is in our girl's hands, what are you worried about?" Shi Anxia heard this and remembered that in her previous life in the palace, there were several capable mothers who could easily understand it. She said the first half of the sentence, and they immediately knew the second half. With just one glance, they immediately knew what she wanted. After all, without those people, she wouldn't be able to hold on in the palace for so long. A hint of melancholy rose in his inexplicable eyes and he said, "Mom Tan, if only you could come and help me for a long time." Tan's mother blushed and felt happy in her heart. What's the point with the girl? Bei Fun has been trained to be much more powerful than an old slave. Then please ask Tan's mother to teach her more. I will do my best. Sister Guifei looked at the harmonious relationship between the masters and servants in the summer courtyard, unlike Aunt 1, who was always gloomy. Thinking that my daughter could also be with me in the future, I felt inexplicably happy, as if my injuries were not as painful anymore. But I heard the young lady say, "In a moment, you'll be the ear and eye of Aunt 1 and tell her where I went." Chapter 7. Grass, wood, and soldiers. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Wei family. Wei Kailing woke up from a nightmare once again. In my dream, the Marquis of Jin sent someone to cry and make a fuss at the entrance of Wei's mansion. They also hung a white lantern on her mansion door and covered the entire lintel with white cloth. Furthermore, it was widely publicized that her eldest grandson, Shi Yunxing, died to save her, and that she was no longer a girl. She had already given her body to Shi Yunxing. She was both shy and angry, so she had to hang herself with a few feet of white silk to prove her innocence. Unexpectedly, even if she died, the Marquis's mansion still wouldn't let her go. Instead, they invited a matchmaker to be hired by the Wei mansion to arrange a secret marriage between her and Shi Yunxing. Finally, her mother was enraged to death in front of her coffin. This dream almost suffocated her. She sat trembling at the head of the bed holding her knees, her face covered in sweat and tears. Mrs. Wei pushed the door in and saw her daughter's appearance. She immediately hugged her with heartache and said, "Linger, my good daughter, we're not afraid. That bad guy is dead, we don't have to be afraid of him anymore." Wei Kailing cuddled up in her mother's warm embrace and thought of her dying for herself in her dream. She couldn't help but feel sad and burst into tears. "Mother, mother. You're here, you're here. Woo woo woo. As long as you're here, I'm not afraid of anything." Upon hearing this incoherent speech, Lady Wei assumed that her daughter had been frightened and her heart was in a state of confusion. She touched her daughter's small face and comforted her softly, "Good Linger, my mother has been here all along. Don't be afraid," your father said, "if it's okay, let's leave the capital and go to a place that nobody knows." Your mother is right. Wei Zhongshi, the head of the Ministry of Works, arrived before he could speak. "Don't be afraid, daughter. There should always be a place for reasoning under the feet of the emperor. If it doesn't work out, let's leave the capital. The world is vast, and there will always be a place for our Wei family to stand." Following Wei Zhongshi into the house, there were also Wei Yuji, the eldest son of the Wei family, and Wei Pingting, the little sister he was holding in his arms. Wei Yuji had been studying martial arts at Baishan and planned to take the martial arts examination next year. As soon as he received a letter from home, he hurried back. He had a bad temper and a straight temper. He clenched his fists and clattered, "That libertine is considered dead. If he doesn't die, I will also kill him. Mrs. Wei is actually very timid." Just now, she tried to comfort her daughter by holding on. When she heard her son's words, her face immediately turned white. "Naor, don't talk nonsense. Jin and Marquis' mansion is not something we can afford to provoke." Wei Yu was afraid of scaring her mother, so she hugged Wei Pingting angrily and didn't speak. Wei Pingting struggled to get down to the ground, threw herself into her sister's arms to hold her, and even raised her hand to touch her sister's hair, imitating her mother's behavior. She comforted her with a milky voice, "Sister, don't be afraid, Pingting is here." Wei Kailing couldn't stop crying as she looked at the neatly arranged family. Remembering the nightmare she had repeated in the past few days, the whole mansion caused her family to perish. "I couldn't help but take a deep breath and make up my mind. If the dream is true, she will no longer foolishly choose to die, but will continue to die with the Marquis' mansion. She will definitely do her best and use all her strength to prevent the Marquis' mansion from dying easily and losing children and grandchildren." Just as she was secretly cheering herself on, the gatekeeper came to report, and the Miss of Jin and Marquis' mansion, Anxia, handed her a petition. Now she is waiting in front of the Wei mansion. Wei Kailing suddenly froze, her whole body cold, and her teeth chattering. The newly made decision was instantly replaced by the fear engraved in the bones. "Here we go. Here we go. The people from Ho Mansion have really come." The whole family was like a formidable enemy, and everyone came to the main hall. Mrs. Wei felt weak all over. What exactly is the Marquis' mansion going to do? Do they really want to climb up Kailing to be willing? Without saying a word, Wei Yu took off his long knife from the wall and slapped it on the table with a loud bang. Don't let me splatter 3 feet of blood today. Wei Kailing suppressed her inner fear fiercely, took a step forward and knelt down straight to the ground. She kowtowed 3 times to her parents. It's all because of her daughter's bad behavior. It's because she smeared the Wei family. She stood up slowly, although her throat and hair were trembling, she remained firm. Please don't be impulsive, brother, and don't miss out on the future for your little sister. Let Kailing solve everything on her own. No big deal, first acknowledge it, then slowly figure it out. At least, let my mother live. Although Wei Pingting is still young, she is almost as big as her sister, holding her in one hand. She could keenly sense her sister's deathly sadness, and suddenly burst into tears. Sister. Sister. I want sister. Wei Kailing kissed his younger sister's head and said seriously, Pingting should listen, sister is fine. Sister will definitely be fine, and our whole family will be fine. Wei Zhongshi let out a long sigh and closed his eyes deeply. When he opened his eyes again, there was already a resolute expression in his eyes. Just put away your knife. Don't show off your strength, Kailing. The worst outcome would be for the whole family to leave the capital. At the feet of the emperor, even the nobles can stamp their feet and take their lives. It's just that. He blocked his 2 daughters behind him and said, with Dad around, it's not your turn to face the wind and rain on your own. Wei Kailing had nothing more to say. He had already heard his father's unquestionable command, please ask Miss Marquis' mansion to come in and speak. Shi Anxia walked into the main hall of the Wei family with Zhang's mother, and 2 maids, Nan Yen and Hong Quebec. As soon as he entered, he smelled a tense atmosphere, and each person seemed to have 4 words written on their faces. A great disaster is imminent. She has a noble status and does not need to bow. But amidst the mournful and angry gazes of everyone, she still deeply bowed to Wei Zhongshi as a junior. Her voice was clear and her words were clear. Lord Wei, I have come to express my gratitude to the Wei family for my bold visit. Although Shi Anxia's actions puzzled the Wei family, they still did not let everyone off guard. After all, if a legitimate son dies in the Ho mansion, there will always be some entanglement. But Shi Anxia asked the maid to offer a generous gift, and Wen said, thank you, young Lady Kailing, for your righteousness. Here we go. Finally, I'm still climbing up. The Wei family's eyes were wide-eyed with anger, and every blade of grass and wood was in danger. Shi Anxia completely ignored and continued, I met Miss Wei like old friends a while ago. That day, I accidentally fell into the water, and Miss Wei didn't hesitate to let her maids jump into the water to save people. I didn't expect anything in return, so I prepared a small gift and went to the door to thank Miss Wei for her help. I also asked Miss Wei to reward these small gifts on my behalf to the maids. Mrs. Wei trembled several times, wanting to say something but unable to speak. Wei Zhongshi also took a step forward in shock. Miss Shi said that day was my daughter's maids. Exactly. Shi Anxia didn't hesitate for a moment. Miss Wei was infected with a cold wind that day and rested in the sedan chair throughout the entire journey. She had never been driven out of the sedan chair. She was worried about her younger generation, so she called the maids to go into the water to save people. That's the fact, Lord Wei. As for the people who saved people in Zhuangzi, I also sent someone to prepare a thank you gift and truthfully inform them. Please rest assured, Lord Wei. After speaking, she gave a deep salute and said, I apologize for your audacious visit, Lord Wei. I'll say goodbye now. A cheerful voice rang out the door, Miss Shi has arrived, why don't you sit for a while? Old Wei, this is your fault. How can hospitality be sloppy? Chapter 8. Meeting my old lady Wei Guifei again. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. The person who came here was about 40 years old, with a square jaw and clear eyes. It was Jiang Yushan, a member of the Ministry of Rights. He also has another identity, that is, the godfather of Wei Kailing and Wei Pingting, the two sisters. An hour ago, he received a letter sent in the name of Wei Kailing. After opening the content, I realized that the letter was actually written by the legitimate granddaughter of Marquis Jianan. In the letter, he was invited to visit the Wei family in an hour to help Wei Kailing maintain her reputation. She also said that her father, Qing Xian, would also come, hoping that Mr. Jiang could appear to agree to recommend his father to help him promote. The words, surface acceptance, are very intriguing. The letter also guarantees that it will never be difficult for Mr. Jiang to do it afterwards. This is very interesting. Therefore, Jiang Yushan cannot help but come. He knew about the incident where his daughter fell into the water and was implicated in the death of the legitimate eldest grandson of Marquis Jianan. Although I feel resentful in my heart, I am powerless. As it concerns his daughter's reputation, he doesn't know where to start. Before the incident, Shi Yunxing, the son of Marquis Jianan, had invited him to banquet several times, but he refused. Because he doesn't want to recommend someone who has been slacking off for years to be promoted and occupy a position that requires practical work. In these few days, he wavered. If he could help the Wei family, he wouldn't be too accommodating either. As a result, the legitimate young lady of the family came to this letter at such a timely time. So he wants to come and see what her plan is first. He saw that although the legitimate young lady of Jianan Marquis' mansion looked young, her eyes were surprisingly bright. She has an extremely beautiful appearance, a round little face with a touch of baby fat, and her porcelain white flawless skin is even milder than the rarest white jade. Actually, this is not uncommon. There are many beauties in Beijing. But this woman has a calming and joyful temperament. With just a slight smile, she inexplicably reminded people of the word peaceful country and peaceful people. Jiang Yoshan's eyes lit up when he heard what Anxia said at the door just now. It's like a dead end, suddenly opening up a new situation and a path of survival. He strode into the room and proclaimed himself as his master. Hurry up, serve tea. Since the girl and Kailing are close at first sight, she must sit for a while. Shi Anxia gave a faint smile, not surprised at all, and then walked forward with a bow. I have seen Mr. Jiang, so it's better to be respectful than obedient, she said. The people who almost petrified in the house suddenly moved. Wei Zhongshi quickly invited someone to take a seat. Madame Wei woke up from a dream and arranged for the maid to serve tea. Wei Kailing was also at a loss. Is the dream the opposite? Wei Yu held his knife and silently retreated to the corner, standing straight. Only the little Pingting's teary eyes flickered and she walked toward Shi Anxia, looking up and saying, "Sister, are you very close to my sister?" Shi Anxia stood up and looked down at the little girl in front of her, feeling a mixture of emotions in her heart. In my previous life, I fought endlessly. In the cold palace, Wei Guifei fiercely stepped on her hands covered in chilblains with her feet, still tightly gripping her slender neck with both hands. Whenever she felt like she was about to die, Wei Guifei would let her go and let her catch her breath. Every word she says is tinged with poison. I hate you. I hate your family so much. There wasn't a good person in your family. You forced my sister to die, forced my mother to die. Shi Anxia. I want you to die without a place to bury yourself. Shi Anxia once explained, you have a head of injustice and a head of debt. You should seek revenge from my grandmother and Aunt One. They forced the death of your sister and mother. When I tried to remedy it, it was already too late. Wei Guifei laughed heartily and went crazy like a madman. Do you think I'll let them go? I won't let each of you, Marquis' mansion. I have no life left. My life has been ruined by your Jianan Marquis' mansion. But when Wei Guifei was executed for harming Long Si, the last thing she wanted to see was actually her enemy, Shi Anxia, sister. The little girl's milky voice interrupted Shi Anxia's thoughts. She slowly squatted in front of the little girl, her lips slightly smiling as she said, "What's your name?" You look so beautiful. The little girl is really good. Looking, with round and bright big eyes, a delicate and perky little nose, and a pink and smooth little mouth that opens and closes one by one. After she grew up, she was so beautiful and flamboyant that she became even more aggressive. No wonder she could make the emperor intoxicated and unaware of the morning court. My name is Wei Pingting, Wei Pingting's Pingting. Sometimes my sister also calls me Ping Pingting, which makes it seem like she has two younger sisters. The little girl explained seriously with her big eyes blinking. Wei Zhongshi tried several times to take his little daughter away, fearing that she might offend the nobleman by speaking carelessly, but was stopped by Jiang Yoshen's gaze. Shi Anxia looked at her old friend who had not yet grown up and pinched her soft cheek. My name is Shi Anxia. After a moment of pause, she lifted her eyelids and smiled at Wei Kailing. Kailing, thank you very much for letting the girls go into the water to save me that day. Otherwise, I might have lost my life. Wei Kailing didn't know what to say, and for a moment, he heard from the gatekeeper that another person had arrived at the Marquis' mansion in Jianan. The person who came this time is Shi Yunxing, the second son of Marquis Jianan, who is also the father of Shi Anxia. The Wei family didn't know what kind of medicine the Marquis' mansion was selling, and their heart immediately hung in their throat. Only Jiang Yu raised his eyebrows deeply and cast a curious gaze at Shi Anxia. Shi Anxia sat in a chair holding Wei Pingting and calmly murmured, my father admires Mr. Jiang's knowledge and often praises him at home as a role model for the imperial officials. I believe he heard that Mr. Jiang is in the Wei mansion, so he came to see his style. When this was said, even a rough guy like Wei Yuji didn't believe it. Mr. Jiang himself was about to burst out laughing. He is a member of the Ministry of Rites, who usually manages the worship of ancestors from heaven and earth, the etiquette of palace banquets, and the weddings and funerals of officials and civilians. The more important responsibility is to be responsible for presiding over the imperial examination. But how can we talk about the role model of the court's appointed officials? It's really lying when you open your eyes. As he spoke, Shi Yunxing strode in. This person actually has a good appearance, with clear eyebrows and beautiful eyes, and a tall figure. The fake smile and frivolity between his eyebrows and eyes only damaged the overall impression. He spoke in his usual exaggerated tone, bowing his hand and saying, Mr. Jiang, I have seen someone. If it weren't for my daughter sending someone to inform me, I wouldn't have known you were at Mr. Wei's house. Jiang Yu gave a faint glance at Shi Anxia standing beside him, thinking of the surface acceptance written in the letter, and then nodded lightly, Your Excellency, I mourn. Shi Yunxing, who originally had a smile on his face, later realized that his son had just passed away and he should have a sad face. He responded with a worried expression, Ah. Fate. Fate. He didn't know why he withdrew the morning hall before the funeral ceremony was over. But I didn't think about asking too much. Since I withdrew, there is a reason to withdraw. Why bother with so much? Shi Yunxing sat down on the chair where Shi Anxia had originally sat, and it was fitting for his daughter to stand behind him. Shi Anxia saw that the timing was approaching and came forward to explain why she appeared in the Wei mansion. Still using the same rhetoric, there are two key points. One reason is that Miss Wei was present at the scene of the accident, but due to being infected with a cold wind on the way, she has never gotten off the carriage. Secondly, Miss Wei and she had already become friends at first sight. When she fell into the water, she let a few maids go into the water to save people. She calmly flipped these two key points over and over several times while talking on wheels. Shi Yunxing nodded while listening, and also made a verbal evaluation, Wei's family has a great style. Chapter 9. The contrary between reality and dreams. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. After confirming that her father had unconsciously memorized everything and could accurately retell it, Shi Anxia finally concluded, Father, my daughter prepared a gift today to thank Miss Wei, and coincidentally, I met Mr. Jiang here as well. I thought my father would always talk about Mr. Jiang, so I sent someone to bring my father over and talk to him. Her voice is clear and her speech is clear. Except for Jiang Yushan and Shi Yunxing, the others looked at each other, but soon they also tasted it. These people were all arranged by Shi Anxia. Wei Keiling's tears kept swirling in her eyes until she finally confirmed that reality was truly opposite to her dream. She quietly walked over to Anxia's side, touching her sister's hair with one hand and gripping Anxia's hand with the other. Shi Anxia's eyes were faint, but she gave Wei Keiling the most stable and brilliant colors. Taking advantage of the topic of Shi Anxia, Shi Yunxing praised his daughter's understanding and gratitude, which was a tradition in their family. Jiang Yushan finally burst out laughing heartily and said, "Lord Shi has raised a good daughter. Good luck. Good luck. Lord Shi has been sitting in this position for quite some time now, hasn't he? It's time to raise the bar a bit." Shi Yunxing was overjoyed and quickly stood up, arched his hand and bowed, "Thank you very much for your appreciation, Mr. Jiang." Jiang Yu smiled inexplicably and said, "Where and where? If Lord Shi could raise such a knowledgeable and intelligent daughter, he must have balanced both the family and the officialdom very well. The court needs such intelligent talents." Overcoming. Shi Yunxing was proud, and his gaze at his daughter was filled with a hint of kindness. Just as everyone was enjoying themselves, the gatekeeper panicked and ran to report, "No, no, no. The master is not good." Lord Wei's eyelids twitched. Wei Keiling's eyelids twitched fiercely, disregarding her identity in speaking before her father. "What's going on?" The gatekeeper wiped his sweat and looked at the two distinguished guests of the Marquis' mansion sitting inside. He stuttered and replied, "It's Marquis Jianan, the people of the Marquis' mansion. Take them and shout loudly at the door, asking for justice from our Wei mansion." Shi Anxia could clearly feel Wei Keiling's fear. She patted the other person's hand and comforted them in a low voice, "Don't be afraid, there's me." Wei Keiling, like a person about to drown in the sea, tightly grasped the floating wood and did not let go. She trembled, but still nodded. Shi Anxia walked forward holding her hand and said to Shi Yunxing calmly, "Since people from our Marquis' mansion have arrived, won't Daddy go and take a look?" Shi Yunxing was originally immersed in the joy of being promoted. When he heard that someone from the Marquis' mansion was causing trouble, he immediately stood up and patted his robe. "Let me go see who was causing trouble," he said. Shi Anxia turned sideways and said, "Father, please." Shi Yunxing walked in the front with his two followers holding their heads high, while Shi Anxia led Wei's two sisters to follow closely. Zheng's mother, and the southern geese and red magpies surrounded the young lady. At the bottom are Wei Zhongshi and Jiang Yushan, as well as Lady Wei and Wei Yuji. A group of people marched towards the gate of Wei Mansion in a grand manner. At this moment, dusk is rising slightly, it is the time for people to come and go. There are already many people gathered at the entrance of Wei Mansion to watch the excitement. Edwin received a letter from Sister Gui and learned that Anxia had brought people to the Wei family. Originally, she wouldn't have come in person, but in recent days she has been infuriated by Shi Anxia and really needs to take a good breath. This led the maidservants and servants of the Marquis' mansion, led by Lu Mama, to block the entrance of the Wei mansion. Lu Mama stood on the stone steps, tears streaming down her nose and telling the onlookers about the earth-shattering love story between Wei Keiling, the legitimate grandson of the Marquis of Jianan and the daughter of the Wei family. She couldn't help but tell stories like a little yellow joke from a brothel. Everyone blushed upon hearing it, but still wanted to continue listening. When Shi Yunxing strode out, he saw his servant holding a long white diamond and climbing his own long ladder, ready to climb up and hang it on the lintel of the house. 2 white lanterns are still scattered on the ground, not yet hanging. Lu's mother still wiped away her tears and cried, "Master Xing of my family jumped into the water and tried his best to save Miss Wei who fell into the water. However, he finally managed to carry someone ashore, but he didn't have the strength anymore. He's gone so far. Master Xing of my family has been gone for several days, but Miss Wei hasn't even seen her at all. I just want to ask if your Wei family still has a conscience. Do you have a conscience? This is how you treat Master Xing of our family. When it was Qing Xian's turn this time, his eyelids twitched fiercely. He rushed forward and kicked the white lantern away with a fierce kick, shouting angrily, "What nonsense! Who asked you to come? Who asked you to come?" Aunt Wen, standing on the side, suddenly turned pale and couldn't believe it. She blurted out, "Old man, old master. It's okay not to shout," but as soon as the sound came out, Shi Yunxing finally found the culprit and said, "Wen Hui, what are you doing?" Aunt Wen stuttered, Anyway, this play still needs to be sung." Her eyes turned red, and tears burst from her eyes. "Master, young Master Xing is gone, and the Wei family has no explanation." Come, ask. Jiang Yushan let out a timely snort, expressing contempt and disappointment. Shi Yunxing felt a thump in his heart, knowing that his great situation had been ruined by this ignorant woman. He was immediately embarrassed and angry, slapping Aunt Wen in the face. "Bitch! Look at what you've done." Over the years, Aunt Wen has been held in high regard in the Marquis' mansion because she has been in charge of her family. She has never been beaten in front of servants. Especially with so many onlookers here, their faces and ears turned red. She ignored and shouted, "What did I say wrong? Your son has been dead for several days. Has Miss Wei come to pay her respects once?" Shi Anxia frowned in confusion and asked, "Why did Miss Wei come to pay homage to my brother? She's just my close friend in the boudoir, what's the point with my brother?" Shi Yunxing was afraid that his daughter would miss the opportunity to show off, so he rushed to say, "Yes, Xia fell into the water. Miss Wei, as her friend, let the maids go into the water to save her, which is already very kind. Miss Wei and Xing are not familiar with each other, why do they come to worship?" Aunt Wen was furious and shook her head hard. "No, it's not like this. Master, it's not like this. It was Miss Wei who fell into the water." "Nonsense." Shi Yunxing stood with his hand on his back, his aura fully open. "Miss Wei has been staying in the carriage due to being infected with a cold wind. This summer can testify." The chatter on the wheels of the car didn't go to waste, but Shi Anxia seemed to be a bit pleased with her father this time. She nodded seriously and said, "Yeah. When I was rescued, I even went to Miss Wei's carriage where she wiped my dry hair. Not only can I prove it, but also the people present can prove it." "Fu Shun, why are you here too?" She waved to the few people hiding behind the onlookers and said, "Come here." 2 or 3 young men walked over and knelt down together. "I've seen the second master, I've seen the young lady," they said. Shi Anxia looked down from above and said, "You are all close attendants of my brother. Let me tell you how my brother died." The person named Fu Shun immediately lifted his head, his eyes firm, and his words correct and round, answering, "Miss, you fell into the water that day. Young Master Xing was eager to save your sister and jumped into the water to save her, regardless of everything. As a result, Miss was rescued, but young Master Xing's foot cramped and he was exhausted, and he was gone." Sobbing. The 2 people next to him also started crying, nodding like pounding garlic, "Yes, that's it." Aunt Wen's eyes were filled with surprise and anger. Chapter 10. What is an auntie as a master? You are listening at novel-full.audio. As things develop like this, Aunt Wen still has something she doesn't understand. It's been calculated again. She suddenly remembered the deeds of Xing and these close servants, which had been held in Tang's hands all along. She chose the person, but in order to dispel Tang's concerns, she gave her body deed. Now as long as they hold the body deed and threaten to sell them, these young servants can immediately change their tune and switch sides. But now that's not the point yet. The most important thing is that she hasn't figured out why the master appeared here, standing inexplicably on the front line with Shi Anxia. What exactly happened here? Aunt Wen's heart was filled with hatred, but she couldn't do anything and could only stare at Shi Anxia. Shi Anxia stood dignified and elegant, with a calm and indifferent tone. People say the deceased is big, but Aunt Wen still smeared and slandered my brother after his death, making him infamous and making people think he is an unscrupulous and promiscuous person. May I ask, what is Aunt Wen's intention? After this little instigation, the onlookers suddenly understood. Today's incident turned out to be my aunt trying to smear my legitimate son, but the tricks involved are quite significant. This aunt must have a son who wants to step on the dead and rise to power. Isn't it? What else is the picture? But it would be shameless to talk to Miss Wei. This is trying to force someone to death. Fortunately, there is someone in their family who understands and is here to testify to Miss Wei. Miss Wei didn't even get off the carriage at that time, so she had to say that she fell into the water. Is it all up to her mouth to ruin her reputation? Miss Wei is clearly righteous and even asked her maid to save someone. The aunt of this Marquis' mansion has a wicked heart and can't bear to die. The direction of the onlookers gradually shifted elsewhere. Lu's mother listened to the surging discussions around her, her eyes turning black in waves. She knew that at this moment, only she could come out and recognize the master. She suddenly prostrated herself on the ground, crying more heartfelt than just now. Second master, it's my fault. I mistakenly thought that young Master Xing and Shi Anxia stood aloof and interrupted in a cold voice, Lu Mama, be careful. You are a servant with a red mouth and white teeth, and if you touch your mouth, you will randomly arrange nonsense. It doesn't matter, but Miss Wei hasn't left the cabinet yet. If you tarnish people's reputation so recklessly, my father will be charged with lax governance. Shi Yunxing was reminded and his whole body trembled, remembering that Mr. Jiang had just praised him. The word still lingered in my ears. If Lord Shi could raise such a knowledgeable and intelligent daughter, it must have balanced the household, officialdom very well. The court needs such intelligent talents. His ears were buzzing, and he gently turned to take a peek at Mr. Jiang with the remaining light. At this glance, my brain was about to explode. Mr. Jiang's expression was extremely difficult to see. Seeing him looking over, Mr. Jiang gave a deep look and turned to Wei Zhongshi, saying, "Go in." Everyone turned around and stepped into the threshold of Wei Mansion, even Shi Anxia followed in, leaving Shi Yunxing awkwardly standing in place. Before turning around, Shi Anxia whispered a reminder, "Father, it's up to you." Then she slipped away. The gate of Wei Mansion slammed shut with a loud bang, causing the servant with white silk hanging from the door to limp and roll down the ladder. Shi Yunxing woke up from a dream and said to the attendant he had brought with him, "Record the people who caused trouble today. I want to sell them all." The servants of the Marquis' mansion looked at each other and were shocked. They all knelt down and said, "Master, spare your life. The servants don't even know what's going on outside the mansion. It's entirely because of Aunt Wen's orders that the servants followed the master." When Shi Yunxing was angry, he didn't even care about Aunt Wen's face. He snorted coldly, "She's just an aunt, what kind of master is she?" Aunt Wen's face turned pale and shaky. Upon hearing Shi Yunxing's more heart-wrenching words, he opened his mouth and said, "I have 9 wives and concubines in my family. Except for my wife who is your master, which one should not be a servant." It is true that Shi Yunxing himself has no skills, but he is very slick. He may seem to blurt out these words, but he has actually typed them several times in his heart. He just wants to tell Mr. Jiang that he is still the wise person worthy of praise. He revealed several pieces of information in his words. Firstly, he is not a person who spoils his concubines and destroys his wives. Secondly, although he still has 8 concubines, his status is all that of a servant. What a servant says or does, how can he count? As for his numerous concubines, it only indicates that his family is wealthy and able to support him, and it also indicates that he is charming and handsome. Anyway, regardless of whether Mr. Jiang can hear you now or not, he wants to find a way to make these words reach Mr. Jiang's ears. Inside the door, Jiang Yoshan's face finally showed a relieved smile, and his gaze toward Shi Anxia became softer. Although Shi Yunxing is not an accomplished woman, raising a daughter is a straightforward and lovely one. He chuckled softly and said, "Your father is actually a wonderful person." Shi Anxia's childish face was tinged with a hint of mockery, and she ignored Jiang Yushan. However, she remained faithful to Wei and said, "Lord Wei, please prepare your staff and stool. I reckon my father will have to borrow them from you later." Wei Zhongshi was shocked. Before he could say anything, he heard the sound of knocking on the door. Outside the door, a servant brought by Shi Yunxing was shouting loudly, "Lord Wei, please borrow a cane and a stool. My master will punish the servant on the street and repay the Wei family with justice." These few words were shouted 3 times in a row. Finally, the gate of Wei Mansion creaked open, and the gatekeeper threw out benches and 2 sticks from inside. Then, with a loud bang, the door slammed shut again. Quickly, the sound of sticks hitting people outside the door was heard, and waves of screams spread far and wide, mixed with the sobs of men and women. Inside the door, little Pingting looked at Shi Anxia with stars in her eyes, admiring her. She whispered, "Wow, sister is great, you know what's going on." Shi Anxia was overjoyed and touched the soft hair of the little girl. She smiled and said, "Oh, Ping and Tingting are very impressive. You know they can predict things well. They are reading." Little Pingting shook the hem of Shi Anxia's clothes. From that smile, Jiang Yushan strangely saw the sense of peace and prosperity of the country and the people. Wei Yuji was dazzled by that smile, and his heart suddenly became confused. Pop it. Pop it. Pup p. It's in a mess. Miss Shi is beautiful and has a good heart. I don't know if next year's martial arts examination will win the championship. If you are the top scorer in martial arts, I wonder if you are worthy of the Miss Shi. Wei Kailing suddenly knelt down at Shi Anxia and kowtowed deeply, "Miss Shi saved Kailing from danger, otherwise, you will have to die, your mother will also die, and then your mischievous little sister will come to me to settle accounts and put me to death. I am the most wronged and pitiful." Shi Anxia personally lifted up the root of the disaster in her previous life and said softly, "Ultimately, it was Shi Yunxing who caused trouble to Miss Kailing. However, Shi Yunxing is Shi Yunxing, and Shi Yunqi is Shi Yunqi. The difference between the two should not be confused." After speaking, she bowed again and said, "Mr. Jiang, Mr. Wei, Mrs. Wei, I bid farewell." When she walked out of the Wei family with her servants, the sky had completely darkened, and only the 2 dim lanterns under the lintel emitted a slightly yellow and warm light. Jiang Yu, who was inside the door, smiled deeply and handed the letter in his hand to Wei Zhongshi.